Hello, and welcome to the behind the scenes Zoom for the new narrative podcast Shell, written and directed by David A. Flores, produced by Cavalry Audio, available now wherever you get your podcasts. With us today, we have Anthony Esposito, who plays Caspian, and Emily Sweet, who plays Taylor. I'm your host, Dave Baker. David, before we get too far into things, can you give us a kind of high concept, a little elevator pitch, as it were, for Shell?
Sure. So Shell is a little sci-fi story set in the near future. It is about a pregnant runaway teen, a robot, and a dog all sort of living together in a cabin in the woods and becoming an unlikely family. And that's, that's kind of it. But because the teen is a runaway, her past is sort of definitely looking for her. So, their little life that they build, it all sort of threatens to come undone once her past comes looking for her.
Right. Yeah. Grounded in the grounded sci-fi tradition, Correct. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit before we start talking to our lovely actors? Can we talk a little bit about kind of the aesthetics of the audio drama, the kind of inspiration behind it, and what you were hoping to achieve, by putting this all together?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the audio drama format in some ways is a tale as old as time, right? It's like you harken back to the radio shows of the, 20s, 30s, 40s, but in a 2022 lens, it's like, ooh, this is brand new and exciting. And, so it is just funny how cyclical everything is. So I think for me, I had never really written anything in an audio only format. So I that was part of the issue is it's, I'm a screenplay writer, first and foremost. And once it was decided that we were going to make this an audio drama, it was really then unlocking an entirely different part of my brain that I just never knew that I needed to access. And it was really just thinking about audio only, and even getting down to really nitty gritty stuff of like, what type of shoes do people wear? What type of floor are they stepping on? It's things that in a normal screenwriter brain, you're not really thinking about. In addition to all the normal stuff of just trying to tell a good story and tell characters that are memorable and, all that stuff.
Emily, I think I'm going to jump to you. Taylor is the kind of emotional center of this story, right? So I guess I'm curious, A, what your background is for people who aren't as familiar with you, B, how you pulled from that to kind of bring the emotionality of your character to life, and C, how you conned your way into this project and got David to give you this part, because it's a really good part. It's a good part.
Yeah, it's a great part. It's so much fun with it. I mainly do horror. I act in horror, a lot of that, and I love that genre so much. And so Taylor is a lot younger than I am. She's, just an adult almost, going through these really, crucial things, this pregnancy, and running away from home, all of this. And so I just tried to think back to, being a teenager again, when every emotion is heightened, when, everything seems like the end of the world, the biggest deal. And then in horror, anything can happen in horror. People are getting stopped left and right, the monster is chasing after you. And so I think that really did also help kind of put me at a state of, oh gosh, it's me or my baby, I make one wrong move, who knows what could happen, kind of things. Having a background in horror, I think, really helped with kind of crafting Taylor character, or how I played Taylor, I guess I should say.
Right. Yeah. Anthony, your character Caspian is a little bit more of a reserved, vocally restrained performance. Can you walk us through how you arrived at some of those choices?
Yeah, so Caspian for me, it was kind of just stripping the human elements out of being reserved and being much more soft-spoken, if you will. I'm already kind of naturally soft-spoken, somewhat reserved guy, so I feel like Caspian wasn't too much of a reach for me. I guess the main challenges with Caspian was just really kind of taking out the like one example David said was like the breadth for emphasis, and really trying to add robotic elements, but not make him a full-on robot, or not make him too stereotypical too either. So it was a fun balance to play, and mainly just kind of the headspace I would get into is just kind of thinking logically without, and then just trying to strip my human elements and emotions from it for most of the piece.
I'm curious for everybody, you know, David, from a directing standpoint, and then for you guys as a performer, I'm curious about what you perceived as your biggest challenges going into it. And then once you were actually in the weeds, what was actually the most difficult part of producing this?
For me, it was, you know, usually being in front of a camera, you can, even if you're silent, you can make a face to kind of, you know, show how you're feeling. But when when you don't have that ability to do so, you do have to, and David was awesome at like getting these things out of us, is to, you know, still show all of that emotion just through your voice, through all of those little subtleties and nuance, everything from your voice. And so that was a challenge, but it was great. I found that I was able to do so much more knowing that, like, oh, the camera's not on me. As odd as that sounds, like, I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but I felt like even though it was only my voice, I still was able just to have so much fun with it and to do all of these things and you know, have that come across through my voice.
Yeah, there's an old artist saying the art is defined by its canvas, right? So you're meaning that like constraints are good for a performer or an actor or an artist. You know, you don't spiral out of control and try and make this giant mural if you've only got a small piece of paper to work on. Yeah. And so the tightrope balance of what you're kind of driving at is it's an interesting tension as a performer.
And what was really interesting just about the logistics of how we recorded it, you know, because a lot of the times, well, we were very lucky in our recording session to have all the actors be in the same room together. So I think that really, I mean, I don't want to speak for the actors, but I feel like that really helped the performance overall, because it sort of felt like you're, at least for me, watching it, it felt like I was watching a play, you know, except the play is we're recording them and, you know, just capturing their voices. But I mean, they were very much acting against each other, you know, making eye contact. It was kind of all the things that you would expect from watching a play or even putting a camera on someone. The only thing is we just were capturing their voice. And again, I think it shows when you listen to the podcast.
Yeah. Anthony, is there a specific area that was challenging for you that you found when you're in the middle of it presented different unexpected results?
I guess, I mean, personally for me, it was just stumbling the words, trying to still like read it almost monotone to a degree, but not trying to rush through it. So that was probably my hardest part. But tying it off what David was saying is the way he kind of designed the soundstage, if you will, it did allow us to kind of play off each other, and because that's one of the basic things of acting is reacting. And so the way kind of David kind of tailored the sound space, we were all able to see each other. We were able to stand or sit, whatever we wanted to do, and just kind of, and we were still able to kind of at least help pull that whatever emotion or whatever was needed from us. It gave us that platform to do that. So that was one of the biggest advantages, at least with this project, I would say.
What was the casting process like? Were you guys doing that when you were auditioning too, or were you auditioning solo?
Solo, yeah. I just went into my closet, closed the door, and recorded my computer microphone, sent it to my manager, and then she sent it in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same process for me. Just recorded it, waited. I did it at night, so it was quieter, and yeah, manager got back to me.
Yeah, and then for my process, it was receiving hundreds of submissions alongside Cavalry, and really, and that was my first time really casting, really in that regard. Normally, I'm used to like, hey man, can your girlfriend be in my movie? So it was cool. It was cool to have a portal that I would log into and just see, it was a little overwhelming, but to see all these actors like, submitting a self-tape of themselves, reading lines that I had wrote, it was definitely a surreal experience. And then you sort of, you take that moment and then you realize like, okay, fuck, I got to cast one. Like there's like 300 actors auditioning for Taylor. I got to cast one. And so it was interesting. I will say, I don't know how many people talk about the casting process, but at least for me, it was, I gotta just say hats off to you actors, because it's tough, and even just from the casting point of view, I found myself having to be a little petty with some things, of being like, well, I don't like the way that actor breathed, so they're off, just because I have to cast one, if there were so many good performances that it's like, well, I have like 100 of my favorites, but you still have to cast the one. So I found myself having to do some really hard cuts on some really ticky-tack stuff that it was no real reflection of the actor or the acting. It just was like, it is sort of like a factory in a way, where it's like, I gotta just, if you did it in the audition the way that I was looking for, like you made it to the next round, and then maybe I give it a day or two and I rewatch it, and and that was kind of it. It's like, if I kept falling in love with your audition, you kind of made it to the next round. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think Emily does a really good job, specifically for Taylor, taking the vocal emotional journey from the broken, bruised person at the beginning to then the middle, and then where it ultimately goes. So I'm curious, Emily, like when you're thinking about this person who has a newborn child and has to protect them in this kind of very sheltered, barren environment, like it'd be one thing if you guys had it, like you were saying, if you had an environment to react against. Not only is the story a little barren because they're like out in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, but also like you guys are not able to react against an environment in the way that normally would happen. So I'm curious about how the emotional aspects evolve for you as a performer.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also is just, I think as a performer and actor, and Anthony might feel this way as well, you in general have to have a big imagination, especially in horror movies. There's things that you do that are like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to be, doing this, that, or the other, but you have to kind of imagine that you would. And so in a situation like this, I think we had a lot of things for us: great casting, great director, great like intimate space. We were able to ask questions prior with David, anything that, we had to read through, and that really helped. So yeah, I think just kind of letting go and being in that safe space with those people, and just being like, I'm going to just try this. And if David doesn't like it, he'll tell me, and he'll redirect me to do, whatever he wants. And so I just kind of let my imagination go and try to put myself in that kind of a situation and take it from there. But thank you for those compliments. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Anthony, your character Caspian has a filter put over your character's voice in post-production. Was that something that you knew going in and you were leaning into that as an end result, so you're trying to act for that? Or is that like, how did you work in that? Does that make sense of what I'm asking?
Yeah, I don't 100% remember if I knew there was going to be a filter. If I did, I didn't really consider, at least with my performance. I try to keep it more grounded, and kind of like what Emily said is the imagination part came just for the environment, and then for the supporting characters, because I had a previous owner, and so I had to kind of weigh that in. But since Caspian is, a robot, it can't be too much, can't be too emotionally driven, and he can't, uh, you can't show as much, at least not off the bat. So, um, long story short, I guess I didn't really know about the filter. I think it's cool. I think it's a good idea, but I didn't really know about it throughout my performance. So, but I'm interested to see how it sounds.
Yeah, I will say it's very minor, Anthony.
I loved it. I thought it sounded great because it instantly, you don't have the visual aesthetic of like, let's say you as a performer had, data style face paint or, a robot aesthetic, like, jumpsuit that you were wearing. Like you don't have that in an audio drama, but you have this kind of very slight audio tweak to the performance that really just instantly, because the piece starts with two characters driving in a car, and it's not like it's not like somebody says, wow, we're driving in a car now, I'm going to roll down this window and I as a robot am looking out of the window, like
right,
you don't, that's not there, and thankfully that's good.
That was in draft one. His name was Mr. Robot. No, just kidding. Yeah.
But to be fair, like, David knows this, but for you guys who don't, like I also have a narrative podcast that I've written, and we do narrative episodes and like more traditional explainer episodes. And in the narrative episodes, frankly, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, guys, can you believe this creature is picking me up and gonna eat me? Oh no.
Oh no.
Like,
yeah.
It just is, it's, there's only so much you can do in an audio format. And David really, I feel like, threaded the needle in terms of working with a sound designer and giving him the direction of like giving things the space to breathe, having those small little ticks, like what I'm talking about with Caspian's vocal, modulation, and the soundscape changing from what, like, muffled, then the window rolls down, and it's not like the window is like it's not that. It's subtle. There's a subtlety to it, which I guess is a good question for you, David. Like, how much of that design aesthetic did you know going in, and how much of it was found over the process?
I wish I could claim credit for being a sound wizard, but I know jack shit about sound. And so all credit of the awesome sound design goes to our sound designer, Jeff Schmidt. He's a rock star in the narrative podcast world. We were super awesome and excited and very lucky to get him. And, the good thing about someone like Jeff is it's like, if he really likes a project, like he's so in demand that, it's kind of like if he agrees to work on a project, he really like works on the project. And I think it really shows. And, I was flattered that he liked the project enough to want to dive in and really create the world that he created. So, to be frank, like the first time I heard it, I was like, fuck, that is good. Like that is, you know what I mean? Like there was not many notes that I had for him. I was just like, yep, that was it. I mean, I did have a call with him, prior to it, and I kind of gave him my thoughts, and we had talked about Caspian, kind of going back to the voice filter, and I had mentioned it, but I did really want to specify, like, hey, if we do a voice filter on Caspian, it has to be very subtle. And I do think that was sort of a direction I gave Jeff from the get-go, is it's like, I kind of want it like good editing, right? Where if people are watching a movie, they're never going to know that this is awesome editing. And that's kind of the same thing that I wanted with the sound design is, if people listen to the podcast and they have no idea that Caspian has a voice filter, then like mission accomplished. Like we did it, because I do think it's subtle enough where we could get some listeners not even knowing that that's a thing. But if you do pick up on that, then I do think there are these little things that reward exploration from the listeners or whatever, because there is a lot of subtlety, kind of as you were saying, it really is immersive. Like again, going back to the window thing, it's not in your face, but it was designed, and it really does feel like you're, being transported into a world. I think especially if like you close your eyes, not to get too woo-woo-y, like close your eyes and just like feel it. I think you really will be transported into the world that we created.
But that's also, that's a tightrope act, because it's one thing to write that. It's another thing to execute it at a very high level, right? You know?
And again, that's where all kudos to Jeff, because if it was me doing it, it would be it'd be like Looney Tunes noises and like
Yeah.
it just would be like, it'd be the biggest crash and burn you would ever hear. So that all goes to Jeff Schmidt, and he absolutely kills it.
The thing I think really works though about specifically the choice for Caspian is that Anthony's performance is purposefully a very restrained performance, but the filter has a warmth and an analogness to it. It almost sounds like an old record or something. And so those two conflicting ideas really, I think, bring out the complexity of the character. And so even when he's just like chopping vegetables or like mumbling to the dog or like wandering around the backyard, like there's a real sense of like instant connection with the character because of that singular audio choice. You know what I mean? It's like a good character design. When you see, I don't know, Darth Vader, you're like, oh, that's a creepy character.
Because of the breathing and the breathing.
100%. It's those little choices that really take something from 0 to 60. And there's a lot of those things in the piece as a whole, both structurally and logistically. And I think one of the elements that's interesting structurally is how you, as a writer, threaded this motif of like voicemails throughout the piece, right? Because you have these kind of, the narrative that we're following with Caspian and Taylor living in this home together, taking care of this baby, and then we kind of intercut between that and people from her previous life trying to get a hold of her, being worried about her, and we get this arc without ever seeing these people. We get a beginning, middle, and end for all these supporting characters. So I'm curious, when that structural idea came to you, the challenges of integrating that in the right places in the story.
For sure. Yeah. Well, the voicemail intercutting, that is all podcast. Because again, a little context, Shell was originally written as a screenplay, and it was sent to Cavalry as a screenplay. And then they kind of hit me back being like, hey, we love it. How about this? How about instead of making it a movie first, we make it a podcast? And at the time it kind of took me aback, and I was like, what? I've never heard of this. Apparently they were ahead of the curve now, because I'm hearing a lot more writer friends come to me and saying, so-and-so production company wants to make my script into a podcast. So I do feel like Cavalry and Shell is going to be one of the first, things kind of out the gate, which is really exciting, because it definitely seems like it's becoming more of a thing. So to kind of circle back to your question, when we decided, let's make it a podcast, I think the original hope was like, great, we love the script, we don't want anything changed with it, let's just record it as is. And I, maybe being a perfectionist, was sort of like, I don't know, man, this was made to be a movie. Like, we have montage sequence, like I don't even know how we're going to be able to do this in an audio format, because it's a visual montage. So I took it upon myself and sort of, really more asked for forgiveness rather than permission, and just kind of gave them like, hey, here is episode 1 of the audio version. If you like it, cool. If not, cool, we'll keep it as is. And I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but it seems like they read that and they were like, yeah, I think this is the better route to go. And so I was like, great, I already wrote the three remaining episodes. Here you go. Like we're ready to go. Yeah. And so the voicemails was part of that. Was okay, when I'm thinking about readapting Shell, the screenplay, into an audio only format, what's a way, and really me just listening to other narrative podcasts and maybe shamelessly stealing from other ideas, but I was like, this was an idea that I had seen happen in other podcasts of being like, hey, we can really play with time and space and do flashback scenes, and we can kind of do whatever we want in an audio sense. And so the voicemail scenes was a way to do that, and it was a way to deepen Taylor's character. As you said, it's all via her supporting cast of characters through her life prior to meeting Caspian, and and I think it works out pretty well in the end.
For Emily and Anthony, I think I don't think any of us would have thought this when you guys were embarking on the journey of making this thing, but I think now more than ever, Shell really feels very relevant because of the Roe v. Wade repeal, Americans in general being really skittish around teen pregnancy and sexuality. And I'm curious if now that it's done and a little time has transpired and the country is what the country is, if that's changed the way you guys have interacted or feel about the piece currently. Also, maybe there's a little, there's some twists and turns in the story. Maybe let's not do super spoilery answers, but just, talking around some things, you know how it is.
Just generally speaking.
Anthony, do you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. I think, it definitely has a bigger impact now after, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I think it is important that, in Shell, Taylor makes choices. She's able to make these choices, and then at the same time, some decisions are kind of forced upon her. And I think that's really interesting now, as depending on where you live, you're not able to make these decisions at all. So I do think that it's a tough topic to talk about. It's definitely a hot button topic, but I think people really enjoy this, and I think that they'll have some sensitivities around it and kind of care for it maybe more than they would have if Roe v. Wade turned. I don't know, maybe not, but I think it definitely has. It's definitely, I don't know how I want to say this. It's definitely a bigger deal now than I think it was previously.
Yeah, I mean, before I throw it to you, Anthony, I think from my perspective, the reproductive rights in the United States has always been a really challenging subject that certain components of our country have just been hell-bent on constricting, and this story grapples with that in very unexpected and interesting ways that I don't think you would necessarily immediately anticipate going in. And I think that's what's really interesting, is how surprising it is. Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, just kind of tie off what Emily said. Like at the time of the project, I would say I didn't really think it was as relevant at the time. And then with the time that has passed, I feel like with Roe v. Wade and everything else, it's definitely going to at least spark more interest in listeners, I think, and definitely get them at least not necessarily thinking more, but just get them more invested in the story, and pretty much use like Emily's character as kind of that vehicle for the story. And so I guess my relationship with the piece has changed a little bit since we finished recording it, because of what happened since time has passed. So yeah.
I also think that, overturning Roe v. Wade isn't just about abortion. It also affects, infertility treatments, IVF, all of these things, which I think also, again, without I don't know how to say this, I don't want to say too much, but our story has a very interesting, not twist, but it's a very interesting thing that kind of reminds me maybe of, a fertility treatment or an IVF or something like that. And so I think, it definitely spans not just, abortions and the ability to have a child, but all of these things that people don't really think overturning Roe v. Wade effects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, I feel like we're probably towards the home stretch of this guy. I
So
think
actually, I mean, we could be, but it seems like I was able to upgrade again. I think we're.
okay, never mind.
I'm just saying we could, but you know, if you still got more,
Okay.
we could.
All
I don't know
right,
what I
okay.
did, but it seems like it's working. I might have
Okay.
paid for it twice. We'll see.
Yeah, I guess, I think maybe somebody who's not an artist might not be familiar with the fact that making things takes forever. Like every part of every process of being creative, it's so much work.
Yeah.
It's so much work. So
I mean, it's taken me 10 years to make like a thing that isn't a PDF on my computer.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
to your point, yes.
Yeah. So first of all, let me be the first to say to the three of you, congratulations on making a thing. Like it is not an easy thing to do. It's very hard. Anthony and Emily, you guys, I hope you feel lucky and that you did it. You ran the race. Not only did you lucked out and you were in the marathon, but then you ran the marathon with aplomb and skill. I think that is something that there's a lot of people that the end of the creative process is the beginning of their job. There's a lot of people that are in marketing and bean counters and accountants and oh, this only got 7 clicks. It's a failure. And like, you guys have done something special. You guys have worked collectively and collaboratively. And I think it's important to, celebrate that in these moments because these wins don't come that often.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, just to echo Dave's point, just to be able to say that, not only did we do something, but it's going to be released wherever you listen to your podcast. You know what I mean? Like, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with like my one act show that had like 10 people show up, for one night only. Certainly nothing wrong with that. But I think to have a platform as big as we're going to have, I know for me is pretty surreal, and I'm super excited and just I can't wait for the world to sort of see, especially what Emily and Anthony do as Taylor and Caspian. I think I mean, if I gotta just go off on a quick tangent and just give them my gush on their performances, again, I for people who haven't listened to the podcast yet, you should definitely stop the video, listen to the podcast, come back and rewatch this. But I mean, Taylor and Caspian you guys are the story, like it very much is a 2 characters in a cabin talking to each other. There is a dog, but the dog, spoiler alert, is all sound design. There wasn't an actual dog on the recording. So yeah, I mean, by all accounts, like you guys carry the story, and I don't think I'm just so happy and so grateful to have gotten you two. And I think Anthony, especially for Caspian, I know I was telling you this when we were recording, but I think Caspian is one of the hardest characters to do right, because there's a lot of ways in which you could do Caspian wrong. And really, it's just leaning into the robotness of it all. And I think what Anthony does in his portrayal of Caspian is kind of, as Dave alluded to, with a little bit of the post-production help, right off the bat, he's a robot. And I think what hopefully deviates Caspian from other famous sci-fi robots is it's like Caspian is almost human. Like there's like that 90% there where you're like, man, I feel like I'm just talking to, or I'm hearing like a friend talk, but then there's just something off. There's something like maybe being intentionally withheld. And I feel like that's the uncanny valley aspect of it. That's the robot part. And I think, Anthony, you really bring that in your performance. which is, again, not an easy thing to do. It is really threading that line. And then switching over to Emily and Taylor, I told Emily when we cast her, like, you are the heart and soul of this entire story. You're the only human in the story. And so, with any good sci-fi story, yes, especially dealing with robots, there's always a question of, like, what is it to be human? And I feel like we get that answer through Taylor, because we really do see a complete arc, not only just with her, and I think Emily really brings it in her performance. Kind of, again, alluding to what Dave already said, where you start the story off, in a really sort of meek, scared place. You're a runaway, pregnant, not really having a plan, and you create a family with Caspian, with this robot, and you sort of see Taylor transform into a scared little girl into an empowered, like, mom, like mother, and like just seeing the full arc of that, and especially with her past coming back to haunt her towards the middle and the end of the story. We also get to see a little bit of that fight in Taylor. So really, like, it's an emotional roller coaster, ups and downs. And Emily, I think you bring it. You are able to go from 0 to 60 when you need to, but then you're also able to live in those quiet moments. And there are a lot of moments in the story where it is just two characters hanging out and talking, and we're getting to know them through their dialogue. And I think both Anthony and Emily are able to bring that in spades. So again, just kudos to you guys. You guys are fucking awesome. So
Thank you. That's really nice.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, I agree with everything David said. I think there's it's a challenge to make people believable, period, in any sort of performance. And it's doubly challenging when one of them is a fucking data.
yeah. A robot. Yeah.
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 When one of them is not capable of having a wide range of emotional connectivity.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, you bring up a good point. Like, and we had certainly talked about this, myself and the Cavalry team, when we were first, discussing the script. And it is the idea that because Caspian is a robot, people just inherently are designed to not trust him. And there was always an element of, like, do people think, like, okay, when's Caspian gonna go bad? Like, when's he gonna break bad? When's he gonna, like, kill Taylor and eat the baby? And like spoiler alert, guys, like, I will admit this, like, Caspian does not break bad. This is not a story about, like, Terminator then, like, terminating everyone in the cabin. You know what I mean? Like, it very much is, like, it is what it is. Like, you see Caspian, and it is, again, it is what it is. And so that was the line that we had to thread, knowing that the moment you say robots, the moment the audience realizes this is a robot, there's going to be a wall there, and there's going to be audiences being like, okay, so when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And hopefully, as the story goes on, we take the pressure off that, and you're able to lower that and just enjoy it for what it is, and be like, oh shit, okay, like, this is a robot, but I'm actually hopefully connecting to him as an actual character, potentially a human being. And again, it just sort of circles to that whole, like, what is it to be human?
Were you thinking about any of those tropes, Anthony, when you were going through the process of this, or were you more in the moment?
I try to stay more in the moment. When I very first, going all the way back to before I even got the part, when I first got the audition sides, it was, I didn't want to be too robotic with it, just because the way David kind of described the character. So I was just really trying to, I just tried to keep things simple with Caspian. And because, I mean, he's a robot, so he doesn't have emotion, which is more complex than, say, just like minute daily daily information. So I tried to make him more, not simple-minded, but just I tried to keep him more grounded and more simple, rather than being afraid of him, being the next Terminator or being whatever. It was just pretty much just keeping things grounded and just really keeping the moments, like just living moment to moment with Caspian, if you will.
Yeah, I hesitate to say I could feel that, but I think that I feel like I could feel it in the end performance. Yeah, I guess I would just ask, as a final question for everybody, and I'll start with you, Emily, like, what are you hoping that people kind of take away from the experience of listening to Shell?
I think a lot, especially now, people are all about like their screens, and it needs to like, I have to have all this, stimulation in front of me or whatever. And I think it's nice to be able to put on a podcast and just, again, your own imagination. What do these characters look like? What do I think this setting looks like? I think that's important for people to kind of go back to, like when you read a book, thinking about what these characters are like and what they look like and where they are and what they're going through. And so I'm hoping that people, can do that when they listen to this. And I think it's an exciting, I know podcasts and audiobooks have been around for a while, but it's cool to do like a feature, like a narrative feature on a podcast. And so I hope people are, really into that. And I hope they go through all of the emotions that, we went through. I think it's a really great story. It's touching in a lot of ways. And so I hope people feel all those things.
Anthony, what about you?
Yeah, I have to agree with Emily. It's definitely a journey. And so I really hope people really take away. I really hope they kind of not just enjoy the journey, but like I really hope like it opens up their eyes, opens up their mind, if you will. So I do think it actually has a level of replayability of listening back to it. Whereas like with a movie, it's especially with sci-fi, it can be very one done type of deal. With this, I feel like it's layered enough in the script and what it sounds like the sound editing to where it can really kind of leave more of an impact on its viewers, if you will, on its listeners, like deeper than a movie, and kind of like Emily said, like a book. I think it can kind of leave that deep of an impact on listeners.
Mr. Flores, final thoughts, closing
thoughts. Yes. Yeah, not to sound too producery, like mustache twirly, but I would love for people to rate and review it on, Apple or whatever podcasting platform they're listening to. Unless you hate it, don't do that. Just give it 5 stars. You know what I mean? And still, just give it 5 stars, but don't give a review. But yeah, I do think that would be great. It'd be great to, because I do think the algorithms, we're talking about sci-fi and robots and stuff. I do think the algorithms for that really do favor people rating and reviewing, which is, kind of shitty to say. But that'd be great. It'd be wonderful if people can listen to it and be like, that was awesome. I'm going to rate and review this, and I'm going to tell people about it. And just hopefully this is, the little podcast that could type of thing, and can start, something, like find an audience. That's my hope, is that this thing that we made, I hope it can find an audience. And I hope that people can, love it and appreciate it as much as the creators of it do. So.
Well, I hope it finds an audience, and I hope it turns into a franchise, and I hope we get Shell 2, Judgment Day.
Judgment Day, yeah.
Shell 3, Return of the King.
Yeah.
Shell 4, the one where we rip off Fast and the Furious. I'm so excited.
Absolutely.
Before we go, where can everybody be found online in case people want to stay up to date with all of your happenings? Emily, you want to start with you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and it's @It's Emily Sweet. So it's not I always say it's Emily Sweet, and people just type in Emily Sweet. It's Emily Sweet. ITSEMILISWEET.
Simple, direct, love it. Anthony?
I'm on Instagram as at actor Anthony Espo, ESPO. Then all my links are in the bio.
Sounds great. I'll let David go last, so I'll say that you can find me and my book, Forest Hills Bootleg Society.
Yeah, bring it up so we can see it. There you go.
Yeah.
Hey.
Out from Simon and Schuster, available wherever you get your books. It's about a bunch of bullied teenage girls that go to a conservative Christian boarding school and then just start selling bootleg anime DVDs to all their conservative Christian classmates, and hijinks ensue. Please go pick it up.
Hell yeah.
Co-created with Nicole Gu, who's the illustrator. You can find me online at heydavebaker.com. David Flores, where can people find you?
Well, and just one more plug for Eisner nominated Dave Baker. You also do have a podcast called
That's
Deep
true.
Cuts. So
Thank you.
Please, everyone, Deep Cuts. Deep Cuts.
Narrative explainer podcast, and it's every week we pick a topic and then walk the listener through the ins, the outs, and the nitty-gritty of an obscure topic. We made a 2-hour musical with 11 original songs about the history, rise, and fall of Napster. We interviewed the creators of the cult film Buckaroo Banzai and created a 6-minute narrative sequence at the end of the episode where a bunch of the original Buckaroo Banzai actors came back and performed dialogue written by Earl Mac Rauch, the original screenwriter. Done all kinds of crazy high concept stuff. It's very fun.
And you do a whole Andrew WK deep dive as well.
We did a whole 3-hour Andrew WK deep dive about how the performance party rocker Andrew WK is not a real person, but in fact a performance art piece deconstructing the modern music industry, which Andrew WK saw and he quote tweeted the episode. Listened to it. He said utter bullshit, which is amazing. Loved it.
That's so good. So yeah. So everyone watch Shell or listen to Shell and then subscribe to Deep Cuts. Listen to some episodes there. You'll get more Davy Bakes, as we affectionately call him. So yeah, you can find me at David Flores Writes. That's David David Flores Flores writes.com. That's probably my main hub website. You can check out, you can see my little bio, you can see videos that I've done, you can see some of the comic books that I've written. And then, also on the socials, Twitter, I believe Twitter is D Flores Writes, because there wasn't enough room for me to put my full name. But everywhere else, Instagram, it's David Flores Writes, or at David Flores Writes. So yeah, give me a follow, give everyone here a follow, and thank you guys for listening.
3 cheers for Sweet Shell, right? That was my favorite My Chemical Romance song. Right? Yeah. No, it's not a thing. Oh, okay.
I love it.
My bad.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave. Appreciate you, man.
You.
We did it.